Wednesday, Phillies Sports History for July 15th, 2024. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Monday edition of the podcast. I have a little issues with the mic and the sound, so I apologize if it's a little muffled today. But a quick housekeeping note, we're officially in the Major League Baseball All-Star break, so that means pretty much from now until Friday, the podcast will be shorter because there will not be really much to talk about with no Phillies playing. So rather than just drone on and on and on, we will keep it clear, concise, and to the point. But there will be some things to talk about. One thing that's not worth talking about is that game yesterday. There are stinkers, and then there are games like this. Pretty much threw up the white flag. Just a ridiculous game. 18-3, 4 home runs, or 8 home runs. It was only the fourth time since 1901 that the Phillies gave up that many home runs in a game. Definitely not confidence-inducing at all, especially heading into the All-Star break. Mercado, it's a shame, but I doubt. I mean, he had to do what he had to do, Rob Thompson, that is, but not good for his confidence. I mean, you had Stubbs in there pitching, and overall, just one of those games that you want to forget. And it does happen. I do think it amplifies the need that they need some help there for the bullpen. I will say that this All-Star break is coming at the perfect time for them. The Braves did win, so they're going into the All-Star break with 8.5 games up. I'll take that, though. I mean, you would have liked to have gone into the All-Star break a little bit more confident, especially coming in off of the sweep of the Dodgers. But this is where we are. Still the most wins they've ever had going into the All-Star break. I don't necessarily think the stench is going to last, but, man, the ball now is in Dombrowski's court. I do think there's some bullpen help on the way, but they'll be fine. Yesterday they drafted 2 high school outfielders, and it's really hard to look at the Major League Baseball draft just because some of these guys aren't even going to be up for another 3 to 5 years. So it's really hard to really examine and know. I mean, for the most part, scouts seem to like both guys. The guy they took in the first round doesn't necessarily have a ton of power, but is a good contact hitter. But again, we won't know for a couple years now. And I believe there's still more rounds of the draft that'll start today. But the Phillies will be fine. Just completely forget about that game. They have them every now and then. It just stinks that it happened against the A's, who the A's for the most part can't hit, but they have had some outbursts like that, like this season. So we'll move on. Like I said, we'll cover the All-Star game. We'll cover Bohm in the Homerun Derby, and then after Tuesday, there's really not much to talk about Philly sports as we gear up for training camp. We'll do some Sixers Summer League. But this is officially the dog days right now. And then once they come back later this week, it's like a full sprint to the playoffs, to training camp. And then right around the corner is NHL and NBA season. So we're at that point where right now there's nothing, but it's going to pick up a lot. Be sure to check out my boys over at the Clashing Conferences. They have their new baseball podcast out. That's available wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. I haven't been able to watch the whole thing, but will see some familiar faces on that. So check out the Clashing Conferences wherever you get your podcasts as well as on YouTube. And then be sure to check out Philly Goat. I've seen a lot of people with the Cruck is My Spirit Animal shirt. It's a great shirt, and 10% of the proceeds benefit Battle Brothers Foundation, they do great things for our vets. And then check out the shoes. I've been wearing the shoes down here in Ocean City, and we do a lot of walking, and they're so comfortable. So check out Philly Goat's canvas loafers. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. That's phillygoat.com, promo code Jim Montgomery. And the Sixers will pick up their summer league schedule tonight out in Vegas. They did sign Alec Bohm, Bona to a 4-year, $8 million contract. So things are looking good, and I apologize for the sniffles. I think I got a summertime cold, which they're the worst kind of colds to have. But Summer League picks back up tonight, and Adem Bona is signed. So looking good for the Sixers. I still want to see one more move, and whether that's a power forward, Gary Trent, something. I still think there's something else up Daryl Morey's sleeve. I mentioned Eagles training camp. We're less than almost a week away from training camp that starts next Tuesday, the 23rd. Did see the article. I don't know who he interviewed, whether it was Jeff McClain or interviewed with, whether it was Jeff McClain or not. But Sirianni did speak, and it was a very good, I thought, honest reflection. He said that it was hard for him to give up control of his offense, but he knew for the betterment of the team, that's what he had to do. And said echoed a lot of what Devontae Smith had said when he told him it's good for the coach because now he gets that 30,000-foot view. And Sirianni said that it's going to be key for him to be in the defensive room to know what's going on and can see it all. He did say he spent some time this offseason talking with some successful coaches to try to talk about the culture, especially the way that season ended. Talked with Dawn Staley, Jay Wright, Rick Pitino. So I think he has a good plan moving in to this season. Again, it is what it is. I know a lot of people are like, oh, he's the CEO coach and he's this, he's that. But I really don't think that the moves they made last year for the coordinators were his decision. I think he had a lot more input in on that. And I do think he seems like he's more motivated. So we'll see how that translates on the field. But good stuff if you want to check out that article on Nick Sirianni. But I am a pro Sirianni guy anyway, so it's good. I mean, he says the right things, and we'll see what happens on the field. But I think part of it is saying the right things will help out with that. All right, today we're going to go back to 2007, and I guess this is the appropriate day to do this after that fiasco that was the Phillies game yesterday. But on this day in 2007, Phillies lost to the Cardinals 10-2 down at Citizens Bank Park. Adam Eaton, our old pal, gave up 10 hits, 6 runs, all of them earned in 4 innings. Phillies scored both of their runs in the ninth, an RBI double by Chase Utley, and a pinch hit homer by Michael Bourne. But the important takeaway from this, it was the 10,000th loss in Phillies team history. They were the first major franchise, I think, in the world, at least in North America, to lose 10,000 games. And breaking down some of those losses, or I shouldn't say most, but a good chunk of them happened between 1918 and 1948. Phillies just had one winning season during that 31-year stretch, or 30-year stretch, which is just unfathomable to think about. One winning season in 30 years. You had the A's who were dominating during that time too. But in 1941, they lost their team record 111 games. That is the most they've ever lost. And then they followed that up for good measure in 1942 with 109 losses. And it's just ridiculous. And then in 1945, they had 108. So that stretch from like 1941 to 1945 was probably the worst stretch. And I know we talk a lot about the late 90s and late 80s. This was way worse than any of them. I did see that it was a world record for the most losses for any sports franchise in the world. So we got that going for us, Philly. But they've had 14 100-loss seasons versus only 3 100-win seasons. Hopefully, we'll get that up to 4 this year. But the high mark was 2011 when they won 102 games. They did lose 99 games twice. Only the 2 World Series in 8 appearances. And I thought this was interesting just as a statistic. 6.7% of all World Series have included the Phillies. So they've made their presence known. They just haven't won as many. But on the positive side, since 2007, since this 10,000th loss, They are ranked ninth in Major League Baseball in wins, and they are a top 10 team in wins all time, but you'll have this when you are a team that came to be in 1883. So let's get those championships up. This year's Phillies, and if you're keeping score at home, including yesterday's game, they are currently 10,174 wins and 11,293 losses. But let's get another championship to the trophy case this year, and I don't know, we got to do better than what we have. But on this day in 2007, the Phillies lost to the Cardinals 10-2 for the 10,000th loss in team history. All right, it is time for the Ultimate Philly Sports Nickname Tournament. Let's take a look at yesterday's games. In the cheesesteak region, no real surprise. The Legion of Doom rolled over the Hound Dog with 80% of the vote to move on to take on Allen Iverson, the answer. That's going to be a good matchup. And then in the Ben Franklin region, it was Smokin' Joe beating the Big Piece in a minor upset with 67% of the vote. But today, we are going to go back to the Balboa region. And in our first matchup, the number 1 seed, the Executioner, is taking on the number 9 seed, Wild Thing. And let's start with the Executioner. Bernard Hopkins, 2-time champion in 2 weight classes, middleweight and light heavyweight. He's the oldest to win a major title, breaking George Foreman's record at age 46. He also won titles at age 48 and 49. And if you remember, his story is a great one. He was in prison for 5 years. But what I think a lot of people don't know, because everybody knows when he was in Graterford and then came out, was that he was a Golden Glove boxer before he got put into prison. And when he went into prison, it reignited his love for boxing. And then when he came out, he became a Hall of Fame boxer. The origin of his nickname comes from his speed and precision, and to me, he is the best boxer in Philly history. And I keep saying this, but you got to take the whole thing into consideration with Bernard Hopkins, the whole presentation when he comes out with the Executioner Max, putting up his X's. But Bernard Hopkins, the Executioner, is the 1 seed out of the Balboa region, taking on the Wild Thing, Mitch Williams. 3 years in Philly, 102 saves, which is number 4 all time for them, behind Jonathan Papelbon, Jose Mesa, and Steve Bedrosian. And the origin of his nickname comes from his crazy delivery where he would practically fall over. And it was a play on Ricky Vaughn from Major League. He did have 43 saves in that 1993 season, and they don't get to the World Series without Mitch Williams, despite what anybody else says or thinks. Joe Carter, as Philly Goat says, ruined a lot of our childhoods. Get the shirt, by the way. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for that. He had the game-winning hit in that 440 game that we just talked about against the Padres. And I was reading something, and maybe the Joe Carter thing was not necessarily his fault. Apparently, Johnny Padres, the pitching coach, told him to try something different during that game, and which he did. And obviously, he missed the pitch, and Joe Carter sent it into the left field seats. And then I think Jim Fregosi gets a pass a lot of times because he's the one that put him out there in Game 4 as well as Game 6 when he could have left Roger Mason in, who was dealing. But that's another topic for another day. But now it's your turn. Which is the better Philly sports nickname? Is it the number 1 seed out of the Balboa region, the Executioner? Is it the number 9 seed, Wild Thing, Mitch Williams? Get your vote in, 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Or you can hit me up on social media, Jimbo_Mont, Twitter, and TikTok, at Philly Jimbo on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, but get your vote in. Who goes to the Sweet 16? The number 1 seed, the Executioner, or the number 9 seed, Wild Thing, Mitch Williams? Let me know any way that you can. And I apologize, a bug just flew into my eye. This is one of those things you get when you're doing live on location. Oh, sorry about that. All right. And then finally, out of the Schuylkill region, we have the other number 1 seed, Concrete Charlie, Chuck Bednarik, taking on number 8 seed, Hollywood Cole Hamels. Let's start with Bednarik. And I still think the origin of his nickname is even better than what we thought it was. Everybody thought it was because he was tough, because it does fit. But he was a concrete salesman in the offseason. So they called him Concrete Charlie. But Chuck Bednarik was the last of the great two-way players. He could have been a Hall of Fame center as well as a linebacker. Went to UPenn, is from Bethlehem. He just oozes Philly, and two-time NFL champion. I think a lot of times everybody remembers the 1960 team, but he was a rookie on that 1949 team. He's the 1950s All-NFL Decade team. 10-time All-Pro. He's on the 50th, 75th, and 100th NFL anniversary teams. His number 60 is retired by the Eagles, and he's a World War II vet to boot, which you love. He flew in the Air Force and had a lot of successful missions there. And then everybody remembers the whole Frank Gifford hit, when Frank Gifford missed the entire following year because of the hit that Bednarik put on him. And then Bednarik stood over him and said, "This effing game is over." He is our number 1 seed out of the Schuylkill region, an Eagle legend, one of the toughest guys to ever play for the Eagles. And he is taking on probably not somebody you would think is tough, the number 8 seed Hollywood Cole Hamels. I do think he's underrated, and he's probably the biggest reason they won the World Series in 2008. He was an ace all year, but he was just lights out and unstoppable during that playoff run. By the same token, though, possibly the reason they did not repeat in 2009. But again, we'll get more on that at another time. He's the number 17 pick overall in 2002. 10 years in Philly, 114 wins, 90 losses, 2 no-hitters, one of them combined, including one in his last start with the Phillies, which is incredible. And other than maybe Robin Roberts, the best homegrown Phillies pitcher that they've ever had. He's number 6 all-time in wins, number 3 in strikeouts, number 6 in innings pitched, and the origin of his nickname comes from the fact that he's from California, and I believe it was Ryan Howard gave him the name Hollywood Hamels. But it is your turn now. Which is the better Philly sports nickname, Concrete Charlie or Hollywood Hamels? Get that vote in, 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Get that and anything else Philly sports related off of your chest. But who do you got? The Executioner versus the Wild Thing, and Concrete Charlie versus Hollywood. Get those votes in. On this day in 2007, the Phillies officially lost their 10,000th game all time, setting a world record, and still a dubious record, no less, that they still hold to this day. It was a 10-2 loss to the Cardinals down at Citizens Bank Park. We'll have more on the Sixers Summer League. We'll have Alec Bohm's how he does in the Homerun Derby, which I believe is tonight. I think the All-Star game was on Tuesday. The Homerun Derby is tonight, so we'll have everything we need to know about that. Let's just forget about the Phillies game yesterday and move on, and we'll start rooting for whoever the Braves are playing, as well as our Phillies. Let me know your thoughts on the Sirianni thing, too. Am I being too easy and just drinking the Kelly Green Kool-Aid, which by all stretch of the imagination is possible? But let me know your thoughts on that and anything else Philly sports related. Get your votes in for the nickname tournament, and we are entering the dog days of summer this week. So be sure to spread the word. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mott, and let's grow this thing, because we're coming out on Friday, hitting the ground running, getting ready for training camp, the end of the Philly season, and gearing up for the fall. Go have yourselves a Monday. This has been Jim Montgomery. This day in Philly sports history for July 15th, 2024. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.